Oh my gosh, the weather. We're going to talk about the weather because it affects all of us, no matter how you're watching us tonight. So we have Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino to join us. We keep hearing, Matt, about these atmospheric rivers. What really is that?
Yeah, no, Pat, it's a great question. And we are currently right now experiencing the third since last week in this series. And here it is. I'll show it to you. All of this moisture, where it's white and green, that's where the atmosphere is just loaded with moisture. In fact, one of the weather balloons launched from the Olympic Peninsula measured more moisture in the atmosphere. It's something called precipitable water. And basically what that means is it's the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere that could actually be precipitated out as rain or snow, hence the name precipitable water. And it was a record. And the records go back, because we've been launching weather balloons up there for 75 years. It's the most ever measured in the month of December. So that's how much moisture is being transported from the tropics up into the Pacific Northwest. So to your question, what exactly is an atmospheric river? Well, it's very similar to an actual river, except it is in the sky. It is a large, narrow, but very continuous band of moisture streaming up from the tropics. And again, it is in the sky. And what happens is it hits the mountains here in the Northwest, or in California for that matter, and this giant band of water vapor, and usually they're not that wide, 50 to 100 miles, but they can be wider, pushes inland. Then it hits the mountains force it upward, and that produces cooling and more condensation. That produces the very, very heavy rain. And if it's cold enough, if you're on the cold side like we were last week when we got nearly 3 feet of snow on Mount Hood, it'll produce a lot of mountain snow. Now, depending on the duration and how warm it is, the ARs, as we call them, can also produce flooding and mudslides, which, hey, that's what we're seeing in the Northwest. So this is basically a classic atmospheric river. Last winter along the West Coast, we had 30, 35 of them, many in California, but many in the Northwest. And they're actually really beneficial when they're not producing damage, because they're responsible for upwards of 50, even 70% of the water supply in the West, especially down in California.
Okay, Matt.
Yes,
before
sir.
you get too far away from that, is it warm because literally it's coming from the south like that?
Yes.
From the tropics?
It's a great question, Pat, because I mean, last night we jumped to 67 degrees. So a couple things going on. Our air is coming from a really warm source, literally from down near Hawaii. So it's a very warm air mass, very high freezing levels. But the other thing that I think happened last night was more of a local or smaller scale event, in that the rain was just to our north. So we dried out, the south wind picked up. And with the lack of precipitation, when it's raining, you get evaporative cooling, because even when it's very humid, some of those raindrops are evaporating into the air. That is a process that takes heat out of the air. It's a cooling process. So without that cooling process, we warmed up into the upper 60s, and we're setting temperature records on both ends of the scale, the low temperatures and the high temperatures. But yes, it is related to the atmospheric river, because they're both coming from very warm, very humid sources.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Is this all related to El Nino?
That's a great question as well. And this is El Nino is kind of a broad seasonal pattern that we look at. So you can't say this is El Nino outside right now. That cloud, that raindrop is El Nino. But this is something that we expect to see in an El Nino winter like we have going on right now. So the short answer is yes, it is related to El Nino. It's not exactly defined by El Nino, but it's something that we tend to see during El Nino years, and we do expect warmer than average winters in an El Nino year. But you know what, Pat? We've had El Ninos before in December, and we're setting records that we've never seen in December before. So you may ask, is there a climate change component here? And I would say probably. I can't say that definitively until that gets researched and teased out, and that can happen with attribution science. It's really making headway. So, likely a climate change component. Can't say for sure on that, but definitely an El Nino type pattern that we're seeing. Okay, you want to talk about what's going on right now?
Yeah, what's happening now?
Okay, we got lots of rain to get through still. It's dumping out there. We're up to nearly 3.5 inches at Tillamook, and that's just since midnight. And if you look at some of these 48-hour rainfall totals, nearly 10 inches on June Lake. And if you go back more than 48 hours, it's double-digit rainfall there. It'll be double-digit rainfall over several days in Bull Run. Nehalem River, there's a gauge out there, nearly 9 inches of rain. Wilson River, over 5 inches of rain. And again, this is just 48-hour rainfall. And flooding, of course, has a much longer memory than that, because the rivers have to take all that water out that's fallen over the last 3-4 days. So that's just a sample of what's going on there. And the heavy rain will continue tonight, but it tapers off tomorrow, Pat, and we catch a breather.
Wow. I always learn so much, Matt. Thank you so much.
You bet.
It really helps me understand what's going on outside the window.
Thank you.
Hey,